Welcome back to Mean Streets, where each week we investigate the best, worst, and forgotten movies of film noir. I'm Luke Deckard.
And I'm Matthew Booth.
And today's case is Touch of Evil from 1958, starring Charlton Heston, Janet Leigh, and Orson Welles. Written and directed by Orson Welles as well. The log line for Touch of Evil is when a car bomb explodes on the American side of the U.S.-Mexican border, Mexican drug enforcement agent Miguel Vargas begins his investigation, along with American police captain Hank Quinlan. The tag is it's a stark, perverse story of murder, kidnapping, and police corruption in a Mexican border town. Matt, what is your reaction to watching A Touch of Evil?
I remember watching this for the first time, and it was a recommendation from a friend of mine who's a big noir fan, and he said it's like nothing you'll have ever seen before. I thought, well, I've got to watch this then. And whilst I think that's probably overstating it, it was a pretty bleak watch. It's undeniably a Welles film, and I just remember being really sort of bowled over by it when I first watched it. And I think it's one of those films that is a difficult watch.
Difficult. Why?
Difficult because, well, I think in some places it's extremely intimidating. In some parts, it's very sort of unsettling. But I don't know. I also find it quite difficult to come to terms with and to get a grip on, because I'm not convinced the plot. The plot is either really complex or it's far too simple. When you watch, I do lose, a bit like The Big Sleep, I do lose my way sometimes on who is who and who's doing what in this.
Yeah.
Whether that's intentional or not, I don't know. Maybe we'll find that out as we investigate it. But I find it tough. I find it tough to get along with, really.
There's probably a reason for that, and that reason might have to do with some of the stuff that happens behind the camera. There's a lot of drama that happened in the making of this movie that I do want to cover. But before we do that, my initial reaction isn't starkly different to yours. I think yeah, I found it quite visually gripping and incredible at times.
Yeah.
I found the mood and the atmosphere quite deliciously noir. I was eating all that up. It is at times very hammy. Orson Welles is very hammy, not just in his size, but in his acting as well. And there are elements of it's an interesting movie because it's 1958, and it feels like this movie that's right. I mean, it is on the cusp of the 60s, and it almost feels like it should be a 60s movie, which we'll get into a little bit later, but like the opening moment, the opening scene, the music that is playing is very almost early James Bond.
Yeah, it is
poppy, and so it's a weird sort of blend of like the times are changing, and this film is but has been. Many say that it is the final film noir, like of the classic film noir movies. They say this is the bookend, as it were, of that period of what we call
the original noir period.
Yeah, we call classic film noir.
Whether it is or not, I don't know. If it is, it's a hell of a way to go out.
It's not. I will say it's not a bad ending, but it's a complicated ending for sure.
It's a very complicated ending.
So the film cost about $829,000. Box office was $2.25 million, so it made a heck of a lot of money. Critically panned.
Yeah, critics hated it.
Yeah, not well received. I have up a review from Variety from a while ago, and it says, "Touch of Evil smacks of brilliance, but utterly flounders in it." Taken scene by scene, there's much to be said for this filmization of Whit Masterson's novel, Badge of Evil. Orson Welles' script contains some hard-hitting dialogue. His use of low-key lighting is effective, and Russell Meddy's photography is fluid and impressive, and Henry Mancini's music is poignant. But Touch of Evil proves it takes more than good scenes to make a good picture. Now, ouch, for one. Damn. But do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think I do. There are certain, just style over content, I think, is a major problem at the minute. Yeah. In a lot of things, in a lot of stuff. And I also found a review which says pretty much that, and this was from the Los Angeles Times, and it says it's Philip K. Scheuer, and he says, as usual, as usual, Wells has placed mood above content. But then he goes on to say, but what mood? Touch of Evil is underkeyed, underlighted, and undermonitored. With the assistance of Russell Metty's marvellous mobile camera, it charges ahead like the pure cinema it so often succeeds in being. So, yeah, I think there are films today that are style over substance, and a lot of popular art, for want of a better word, is style over substance. But I think the difference with Touch of Evil is that the style is also undeniably Orson Welles, and is all the better for it. I don't come away from this film thinking, well, that just looked good, but there was nothing else to it.
Yeah,
I come away from this film scratching my head for a lot of reasons. Yeah, for a lot of reasons which we'll get into.
Yeah,
but yeah, I think on balance, I think I probably do agree with that. That seems to come as a surprise to you.
a little bit, because I'm still on the fence. I haven't fully solidified. I watched this days ago, and I'm still, at the time of recording, still trying to. I don't know what my rating is going to be at the end of this, so we will get there by the end. But let's chat about some of the drama that sort of went into this. So the version of the movie that is out today is a restored version that was completed in 1988, about 10 years after Orson Welles died. He had, or I think Charlton Heston found, a 58-page memo that was to the production that said this is what needs to happen to fix the movie. We'll get into why he wrote this letter and stuff in a little bit, but that's just a little bit of background knowledge. So the original film was slightly different. Probably that has a lot of effect on, I think, even the final version that we have today. But the version we have now is the closest to what Orson Welles wanted based off of this memo. But Orson Welles wasn't meant to direct it. He was hired to play the character of Quinlan, but when Charlton Heston found he was attached, he's like, "Why don't you get this guy to direct it?" And
I think he took it for granted that Welles would be directing it because his name was attached to it.
Yeah, so he said that. Then the studio talked about it, and basically Welles agreed to do it. Would do it for his acting fee, which he was paid $125,000, which in today's money is $1 million. If I did the calculations right, he got paid $1 million in today's money for this movie, to act in it and direct it, which ain't bad. That's ain't bad. So the film was produced by Albert Zugsmith, who was known as the King of Bees. It's interesting. So Zugsmith hired a television writer named Paul Monash to write the adaptation, but told this guy Paul, you got to write it in 4 weeks. You got to adapt it within 4 weeks. That to me is nuts, and I don't understand why they made this poor guy adapt a book in 4 weeks. That seems ridiculously unnecessary to me.
It's pretty onerous.
I mean, the money must have been decent or something. I don't know what, but like, just that to me is nuts. The film went through some various issues and not getting done, and then once Orson Welles was attached, then things began to finally move. But it was Zugsmith. So this film was originally titled The Badge of Evil, as we've mentioned. It's Zugsmith who retitled it A Touch of Evil, which Orson Welles criticized as calling it silly. What do you think of that? Do you think Badge of Evil is better than Touch of Evil? And in addition,
I don't.
Do you think Touch of Evil even makes sense?
I don't, and I don't.
Yes.
I think I can make more sense. Well, I can make sense of both of them. But I think Touch of Evil just sounds better than Badge of Evil. Badge of Evil makes it very much. It tells you too much. I think it's not intriguing enough because it obviously means corrupt cop.
Yes.
But
is that a bad thing? It's not a mystery. It's not a mystery that Quinlan is a corrupt cop. Welles' character is blatantly corrupt from the minute you meet him.
He is. Yeah, he absolutely is. And I think I'm right in saying that in the book it's the other way around. In the book, it's the Menzies character that is corrupt and Quinlan isn't. I think. Somebody can let me know in the comments if I'm wrong on that, maybe. But I'm pretty sure that's right. But yeah, and no, I don't think either is a bad title necessarily. I don't think either is a stupid title, but I just prefer Touch of Evil because, you know, I wonder whether part of the idea of that is that most of the people in this film are touched by evil. You know, not all of them have a badge, you know, of evil. They are touched by evil. And because there are no heroes in this film. There's something else we'll get onto later. There are no heroes in this film.
Really? So you think heroes in this film? You wouldn't say that Charlton Heston is he's blatantly the hero.
He's meant to be the hero, but he doesn't do anything heroic, does he? He does. He doesn't change. He doesn't go on any sort of heroic journey. He's just the sort of. He's the same at the end of the film.
He's Charlton Heston.
It was Charlton Heston. He's only a hero because he's Moses. That's what you say.
Yeah.
He's the same character at the end as he is at the beginning. He's not gone through anything that makes him heroic. He is. As I was watching it, I was getting vibes of Superman. You know. I know what you mean. Yeah, and it's not his story, is it? It's Quinlan's story.
Yeah.
It's Quinlan's story. So I mean, Vargas is. Yeah, he is. If the film's got to have a hero in it, then Vargas is it because he's the good guy.
Yeah.
Superman's not a bad parallel actually.
Yeah. Superman is like totally an aspirational hero. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what Miguel Vargas is. He's so good. He's incorruptible.
But he's a useless husband.
That is true.
He's a useless husband. I mean, how many times he leads Janet? Well, he doesn't lead her into danger. He lets her wander off into danger on her own terms. And you know, and he doesn't take her out of Mexico and put her somewhere safe when he knows that bad things are happening.
He does. He puts her in that American hotel.
He deserts her on the honeymoon to go and look at like a crime that he's got no connection to, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, but hold on. She wants to go to that American hotel. He lets her.
He does
that was her choice. So it's interesting because you think about like when we were talking about The Big Heat, and that film was blatantly like, you know, looking at the changing in relationship between men and women. I mean, she's calling the shots. I want to go and do this, and I'm going to do this. And he's like, okay, darling.
Yeah, she is. But he doesn't really give her any sense of protection, does he? Because he's always wandering off, poking his nose into other people's business. That's why.
Yes.
You know, instead of just getting on with his own job, really. And I mean, and Janet Leigh is fabulous in this, but her character is a bit sort of naive, isn't she? To say the least.
I would call her character inconsistent versus naive. And yeah, I would say it's inconsistent.
Yeah, I mean, she's already sort of had a run-in with the gang.
Yes.
And then one of them comes up and taps on the hotel window and she goes straight out to meet him.
The reason I don't want to call her naive and rather call her inconsistent is because when she first gets pulled away to meet with Uncle Joe Grande, the big gangster guy, like, I found that scene really cool because she was tough. She was tough. Yeah. She was snapping back. She was throwing her weight around. She was throwing her connection to power around. Like, I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, you can tell there's fear. You can tell she's a little bit nervous, but it's just kind of under the surface. And I liked it. The problem, and also like then that other scene in later in the film when when the gang is harassing her and harassing both of them really, and she's changing in her hotel room and she turns the light off and someone's flashing a flashlight inside to see her getting undressed. You know, she gets angry. She doesn't like cower. She angrily puts her clothes on, turns the light on, screams across the road at the person in the other building, undoes the light bulb, throws it across the, you know, and you know, tries to hit the person. So she's very proactive in some ways and very tough. Yeah. And I like that. But once she gets taken away and she's put in that hotel, then she suddenly becomes damsel in distress.
She does.
And I don't, for the life of me, I don't understand why. And I don't understand why she wasn't clocking what was going on around her.
Yeah. Well, I think what we're saying now is why this is a film of scenes rather than actual story.
Yeah.
Because that scene in the hotel room is one of the things I find disturbing. I think it's very unpleasant.
Yeah.
And one of the most unpleasant things about it, for my money, is when Mercedes McCambridge, who is the female member of the gang, is there and says, "I want to watch." There's something sinister about that. More sinister than any other aspect of that scene, really. And that is a great scene. It's also a great scene where she's standing up to him half an hour before or 20 minutes before. But those two scenes collide with each other and they jar with each other because it's not the same woman.
Yes.
So I think this is exactly what these critics are saying. It's mood over substance rather than style over substance, perhaps. And it's a collection of scenes between two sets of credits. It's rather than a coherent ongoing story.
Yeah, because I think on the writing side, so Charlton Heston in an interview made note that once Welles was brought on to direct it and was going to he was then going to also rewrite it, and apparently Welles rewrote the script in 10 days.
Yeah,
Heston says, and this is he says it was he vastly improved it. So what in the world that script was like before Welles got his hands on it, I would love to know, because my God, what they said Welles did was Welles basically rewrote the script in 10 days, taking the whodunit element and making that the lesser part of the story. So basically reducing the mystery element and enhancing the corruption element of the story. And that is definitely some of the most compelling stuff. The mystery really is thin and a little bit vague and wishy-washy.
Yeah, it's about it's about Quinlan being corrupt more than who planted the bomb.
Yes.
It doesn't really matter who planted the bomb, does it? Because whoever he's got his eye on is going to go down for it. That's the upshot of the whole setup. It doesn't matter who it is; it's just someone he's going to frame. But I think Welles, because in the book, again, I'm fairly sure this is right. In the book, the Vargas character isn't a Mexican.
Correct.
He's an American.
He changed a lot of people around.
And he changes that to play up, presumably to play up on the idea of racial prejudice and bigotry, and to make Quinlan not just a corrupt cop, but an unpleasant human being. So that, as the film goes on, it becomes an issue of who is Quinlan, and is he just an unpleasant man, or is there a reason why he is the way he is? And all that you can just tell that's Welles. And I bet you that's not in the original script.
Probably not. Should we talk a little bit about casting? What do we think of Charlton Heston playing Miguel Vargas?
Well, you wouldn't do it.
Awkward.
You wouldn't get away with it today. Let's put it that way.
No.
It is, and I'll tell you, it's always struck me as awkward.
It's very
always
awkward.
Struck me as very, very miscalculated. Although at the time it probably wouldn't have been commented on. He did say that one of the big mistakes he made as an actor was that he didn't use a Mexican accent for this, and I have to say, I strongly disagree with Charlton Heston on that. I think if he'd have attempted to do that, we would have got something quite horrendous, more so than it is already.
It would have been a Speedy Gonzalez caricature.
It sure would. I don't really think, given how the film is shot and how dark it is, because it is a darkly shot film, almost nothing happens in daylight in this film. I'm not sure they needed to put any makeup on Charlton Heston's face. Quite frankly,
makeup was also awkward. It was
I don't think they needed. If they wanted to put some on, I don't think they needed to put quite as much as they do on, because it's blindingly obvious. Whether that's because of the quality of digital prints we have now or whatever it is, quality of television, I don't know. But it stands out a mile, and it's no better than Al Jolson in many ways. It's horrendous. Yes, and I think it's really, really dated the film.
It has. There's an interview with Heston where he's like, "I'm bemused that you reported my casting as Mexican being bizarre." And you know, he's like, "Well, I played Brits and Scots and Irishmen." And it's like, yeah, okay, You know, it's like, get it. You played Moses and stuff, man. We get it. But like, you know, you probably should, you know, come on. It's easier for you to play as Brit or a Scots Irishman, you know, than it is to play a Mexican dude. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know why. Presumably there weren't enough Mexican star names to sell the film on for them to cast a Mexican.
Charlton Heston was attached to this film before Orson Welles got attached to it. He was a mega hit because of the Ten Commandments. Yeah. Big name, big action hero, big star. We want to keep him in this. We want to keep him attached because this guy will bring in the people, bring in the money.
And of course, it is possible. We haven't seen the original script before Wells gets his hands on it. It is possible that the Vargas character was not a Mexican in the original script, in which case Heston would have been great casting.
Well, and they say that Wells changed that. So
Wells changed it to Mexican. So presumably that is the case. Presumably that is what happened. And they didn't have, you know, they were too far down the line to get rid of Heston and bring somebody else in, if indeed they could have brought somebody in at all.
Yes, because isn't it in the book? Isn't it the Janet Leigh character is Mexican?
The races are reversed in the book.
That just would have made way more sense. Like, come on, I don't understand why the movie just didn't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't either. I don't see. I mean, I understand why he changed it so that the two leads are people who would naturally hate each other because they are cause and effect essentially. So Quinlan is a racist. It creates more dramatic tension if his opponent is a Mexican because he's particularly Mexican racist. But that's that's one of those ideas that sounds great when you say it. You know, good on you, Orson. But the actual practicalities of putting that into effect mean that they have to essentially black up Charlton Heston.
Yeah,
and also, that is a major issue now. Really,
I totally agree. The other thing also that I found inconsistent with Orson Welles' character of Quinlan is he goes to that fortune teller's business, fortune teller lady Tanya, played by Marlene Dietrich.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, I haven't, you know, she knows him from the past and he used to come to that facility. So I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure that's on the Mexican side of the border.
Yeah.
But Quinlan's meant to be racist against Mexicans. But
yeah.
So basically I'm like, what's the film trying to say there? Like, I would understand it if they're trying to get at, he sort of, I don't know, plays out some sort of disgusting sort of dominance or whatever, and because it's almost like a brothel as well. No, there's a brothel next door, there's a strip club next door, but there's just this sort of hint that there's like other stuff that happens at this fortune teller's establishment.
I've always taken away that she's a prostitute as well.
Yeah, that was definitely the vibe I got, and so it was a very weird, inconsistent aspect of his character. So I was trying to understand, like, why are you interested in this establishment? Why are you interested in this fortune teller? What's your full relationship? Why do you? I don't understand why you are racist. You are racist, but then you're doing things and engaging. So it is inconsistent. It is
inconsistent. It is.
It's frustrating at times.
Apparently, Wells was constantly rewriting this script, so they never knew what lines they were going to have to learn. And I think that shows, because you and I know well enough that if you change something as you're going along, when you're writing something, you can forget what you'd written 2 days ago.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And that creates inconsistencies.
Yes.
Because they're on a shooting schedule, they don't have time to put that right. Whereas if you're writing a novel, you sort of can.
Yeah.
But so I don't know if there's an element of that. But Wells is such an experienced filmmaker. He must have been better than that, if you know what I mean. That's the only thing that stops me thinking that was the case. But maybe not. Maybe he just was carried away with himself and thought the next idea was better than the last one. Because I think the part of that Tanya character is to show that Quinlan has something redeeming about him, because not everybody's bad. Because she is obviously visibly upset and saddened by what he looks like, by how far he's let himself go.
Yeah.
You know, and he says to her that it's a good line, but again, quite what it's meant to achieve, I don't know. But he asks her about his future, and she says something like, "Your future's all used up."
Yes.
You know, and that's a great line. But But you're right. Why is he asking a Mexican fortune teller of all things? And why is she feeding him chili con carne and being nice to him, or saying, you should stop eating candy and get some proper food?
Yes.
Well, it's all suggesting that there's a backstory to Quinlan, which he's hinted at, and that explains his racism to a certain extent, or his bigotry to a certain extent, that his wife died and he lost his leg and all that business. But it's not examined in sufficient detail to make Quinlan necessarily three-dimensional. And that then leads me onto something about Quinlan's character, which does surprise me, and that is perhaps I don't want Quinlan to be three-dimensional as a character, and perhaps I just want him to be utterly irredeemable and utterly corrupt. Because when he is being those things, he's a great villain. He works very well as a villain in this, to my mind. And when you try and humanize him, even if it's a lost hope, which is what she means when she says your future's used up, it weakens that idea. So, do you know what I'm saying? It'd be better if he were a little bit more two-dimensional. Ironically,
maybe
I don't know what you think of that.
I don't know. Maybe I see what you're saying, and I think this is the problem with the writing of this film, and probably the rushness of writing this film so quickly, and if they're changing things on the spot, all adding up to this smorgasbord of inconsistencies. But it's the moments where they try to humanize him, I feel like they really stand out. So we learn in the film that Quinlan's wife was strangled to death. And do they say who? They don't say who did it.
They don't say who did it. No, they don't say who did it.
So we know that his wife was strangled to death. We don't know if that's the root of his racism or what. We just know that it happened. And then at the end of the film, when he realized that he's been caught, he's sort of there is this weird attempt to make him out to be like a Dark Knight figure, and it didn't really work. It was very bizarre. This sort of last ditched effort to sort of attempt to make him to redeem him, and those moments I think don't really work, because later in the movie, once we found out about his wife, and then later in the movie when he tries to frame Vargas's wife for murder, he strangles someone, and it made me think, did you murder your wife? Yeah,
absolutely. That's always been something that's been at the back of my mind.
Yeah.
Did he do it? And is it not? It is the racism and the bigotry all stemming from the guilt of that. That's always been something that, but it's never made clear. It's never explained. No. It's never pointed out.
Yeah.
And of course he has to strangle that. You're meant to think that he strangled it because he's obsessed with how his wife's death and all the rest of it. But if he caused it, then that's his natural MO, isn't it?
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because we know Quinlan is and his partner have been planting evidence for years. And putting basically convicting people wrongly. Do you think some of that stuff, that vague stuff, would matter or be more interesting if the general mystery of who planted the car bomb and Quinlan trying to frame someone was tighter? Would those vagueness of did he kill his wife or did he not kill his wife? Is this the reason for this? Is that the reason for that? Would that stuff hold up better if the actual mystery element was handled better in this movie?
Yeah, I think it probably. My gut reaction is it probably would, because if you saw more of him planting the evidence and understood why he did it, and got a bit more insight into why he started to do it, because that's the interesting side. Why did he start? Then all those things that he would never confess to, like the murder of his wife, if that's what it is. And all those things that Vargas would never be able to find out or prove, would all be in the audience's head. and there would be questions that the audience would be invited to decide for themselves, and that's never a bad thing.
Mm-mm.
That's never a bad thing. So yeah, I think if there'd been more emphasis on that, on the mystery, then I think a lot of these things would have had a lot more force and would have made a lot more sense, and probably would have been a lot more rewarding, because it is very often in film noir. We talked about this on other episodes. At the end of a film noir, there's a fatalistic side to it where it's all been for nothing, or you find out there's nothing you can do about it, no matter how hard you try, whatever the problem may have been. And there's a sense of that in this, in that he finds that he didn't need to have planted the evidence anyway. He doesn't need to. He doesn't need to have done it. So that's almost like saying Quinlan is the noir hero with this, because he is the one who is suffering that fatalistic film noir ending. But he doesn't.
It should be Vargas. It should be Vargas.
He doesn't deserve it. Yeah, yeah. It should have been better if Vargas. It would have almost been better if Quinlan survives, gets away with it, and Vargas is fired. That would have been Vargas's noir ending. There's nothing I can do to touch this man. He needs bringing down, but no one can do it. That would have been a sort of decent ending for Vargas. But Quinlan doesn't deserve that ending. He doesn't deserve that sympathy.
No.
And I think part of that is because he is obviously the villain of the piece. Again, as you say, if the mystery side of it had been better and been more central, then maybe there would have been an argument to say that perhaps he does deserve that sort of ending and that sort of ambiguity. Yeah. But as it stands, I don't think he does. It's almost as if they can't decide whether to have him redeemed or redeemable or absolutely evil. And all the things that happen in the first two acts of the film lean very much to the latter. Yeah. That he's past redemption. This isn't Darth Vader. There isn't a little bit of him left that can be saved. He's gone. He's the Emperor. The Star Wars metaphor going.
It is quite frustrating because there are elements that I think I really enjoy when it comes to the mystery element. So the story kind of becomes interesting when they bring Sanchez in and they're questioning him, and Sanchez is married to this white girl whose dad just got blown up in the car, and so it's basically like, oh, why'd you kill your father? Why'd you kill your father-in-law? Blah blah blah. And they're like, no, we didn't do it. Blah, 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 blah. I enjoyed all of that, and I enjoyed Charlton Heston in the going into the bathroom and looking inside that box, and there blatantly being no dynamite, and then suddenly there being dynamite, and all that kind of stuff was interesting. And I guess at times it did sort of remind me of The Third Man, where it's like there's a lot of these little interesting mystery elements, but none of them are fully developed. None of it goes very deep.
Yeah, that I'd agree. And it reminds me of The Third Man, especially the chase at the end reminds me of The Third Man. And that scene in that apartment is really good. The dynamics of that scene are really good. That's what this film should have been like all the way through. That's what this film needed to be all the way through. It's all cops and one villain. But the cops are themselves not what they appear to be. I mean, there's a lot going on in that scene.
Yeah. There's also one thing I will say, one of the many things I will say. The film is also stuffed with characters. Maybe too many characters. We can actually probably link this to the opening shot, which is quite famous. It's a 3-minute tracking shot stuffed with people. Yeah. And that's kind of what the film is like. It's a bunch of people doing a bunch of stuff, and it's a little bit unclear, even in that opening tracking shot, which is very impressive. Very impressive. It's a 3-minute long, everyone has to hit their mark tracking shot. That hadn't really been done to that, precision before.
No, and that's pure Welles. Pure Welles.
Yes. But even in that tracking shot, you are sort of like, who am I meant to be? What am I meant to be focusing on? Every once in a while, like Charlton Heston and Janet Leigh, they come into focus, they come out of focus, and you're looking at all this stuff. And there's elements of the Mexican gang in the background, moving around, doing things. Like you can see a lot of moving pieces, and I feel like that's just basically the film. And it's a cluster of people and a lot of stuff happening, and it has that focus issue of, okay, am I meant to be focusing on Charlton Heston solving this corrupt cop's case, or am I meant to be following this corrupt cop doing corrupt things? Or am I meant to be wondering if Janet Leigh is going to get molested by this Mexican gang and doped up? You know, what am I? What's the focus? What's the focus?
I agree with that. I agree 100% with that. One of the other films we talked about on previous episodes, I can't remember which one it was, you did say something along the lines of, I don't know who's who, and they all come too quickly. And that's the case here. Because
It was out
they're
of
introduced to out of the past. That's right, out of the past. They're introduced too quickly.
Yes.
So you've not got time. You know, at the beginning of the film, you're still trying to find out who's who and how they all fit. So you need to get to know one set of people before you can before another can be introduced properly.
Yeah.
So you got to focus on Charlton Heston and Janet Leigh and find out who they are. Then you get Quinlan. Then maybe you get the gangs, but they all come at once. You know, and there's a it's an uncredited Joseph Cotton, I think, so another third man connection, and he says something about, you know, Lineker owned the city, but now you could put him through a sieve or something. He says after he's been blown up, and I do spend thinking, who's Lineker?
Yes,
who's Lineker again? And while I'm trying to remember who Lineker is, I've moved on to another set of people because they're not properly delineated until the action's really going, until the film's got going. And that, I think that is a flaw. That is a writing flaw. And you're right, it is all that opening shot is like a microcosm of the film. You know, Charlton Heston's walking in a straight line, predominantly in a straight line with Janet Leigh, because they are walking a straight line. Through morally speaking, they're walking a straight line. Everything else is happening around them because they're the satellites around which everything happens. But too much too soon. Too much too soon. To the extent that by the time Lineker and his wife are talking to the border guard, I have no idea really, because Charlton Heston's gone by then. And the dialogue's very quick. The dialogue is really sort of whip-crackingly quick, that a lot of information is given that you don't necessarily catch because you're just in a whirlwind of people, images, admiring that crane shot, and a bit of information being given to you. Yeah. You know, it's too much. It's too much. It needs to calm down.
Yeah, because Lineker's wife says that comment. She makes that comment right before the car blows up. She's like, oh, there's a ticking in my head. I can't get it to stop. And it took, then the car blew up, and I was like, oh, wow, that's really shocking. But then I thought, was she in on it?
Yeah.
Was she? Why was she like? It was a line. The line made me think of The Dark Knight. That scene in The Dark Knight when there's the guy that the Joker sews a cell phone into the guy's stomach, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, he said it's like lights, they light up like Christmas, and he's crazy. He's crazy. And I was like, is she meant to be like? Did this influence The Dark Knight? That was the vibe. That was the vibe I got. But I was like, no. That was Marsha Lineker's dad, who's married to the Mexican Sanchez. And I'm like, okay, why did she say that? Like, surely if you hear ticking, you'd be like, darling, I hear some strange ticking. What is that? Not, there's ticking in my head. It's not ticking in your head. It's not in your head.
You'd know it wasn't in your head. You'd know it wasn't in your head.
Yeah.
You know, there's a difference between something happening in a boot of a car that you're sitting in and something in your head. It's, you know, it's, whether that's a joke. I mean, I don't know. Is it a throwaway joke? I don't know. If it is, it doesn't work. If it is, it doesn't work. No. It would be much better without it. But I just think, as I said, I think it just needs to calm down, the opening to that. Because if it's just the crane shot and then it ends with the explosion and there's no attempt to introduce anybody or dialogue, then that's good. You know, that would be quite an impressive opening to a film. It'd be a shocking opening, and it'd really grip you. But by the time that bomb goes off, I'm wondering that I'm not going to be able to keep up with who's who I should be rooting for.
Yes,
you know, it's too distracting to me.
It is, because it also means that supporting characters that need to be enhanced get sort of missed. And this is where the problem you have Vargas, his wife, but then you also have Vargas's friend Al Schwartz, who is a cop who's helping him out the whole time and is on his side.
Yeah.
But and you almost like those three are meant to be like the Ron, Hermione, and Harry of the the piece. But their sort of like trifecta is really quite ineffective. It's very poorly developed, and I was expecting. It almost seemed like I think like Al, the character of Al, literally just meets Charlton Heston's character, and he just is like instantly friends with him and instantly is helping him. I don't get the sense that they have any history, but I would have thought they probably need some history, but they don't got it. But
yeah. And then yeah, I agree absolutely, and I agree, and it's just one more person to have to deal with. And then what happens is the coroner's there, the district attorney's there, and they're all saying how great Quinlan is.
Yeah.
And why can't I just have Quinlan and Vargas? Or Quinlan and Menzies and Vargas?
Yeah.
Because those are the three people that matter in the end. So why can't all that conversation about clean slate for 30 years and all that business?
Yeah.
Why can't that just be the three of them?
Yes.
And Vargas saying, well, that's very impressive. I don't need the district attorney. I don't need the coroner's one-liner from Joseph Cotton, which is dubbed by Welles anyway. So that's completely wasted. And you're right, I don't need Al. I don't need any of those at all. Those people can go because everything they achieve can achieve themselves.
Yeah, well, yeah, because Al, there's a scene towards the end where Charlton Heston's character turns to the character of Al and says, "Do I still have any good graces left in your book?" And he's like, "Absolutely." And I guess those graces are he's going to go look at the police records. But when Menzies finds Charlton Heston's character there, he's like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "It's open. This is open to the public. I'm allowed to." Like, so then what? You didn't need Al.
You didn't need Al's good graces then, did you, you moron?
Yeah.
Just walk in.
Point of that? Exactly.
I don't know. You just do what Jack Nicholson does in The Hall of Records and walk in.
Yeah.
If it's a public, and again, it's an inconsistency. Again, probably one that arises out of, we've got to change this. I'll rewrite it now. Having forgotten what he's had Al say. But Al doesn't make any impression on me, nor does the district attorney, and nor does Joseph Conn. They need editing out,
with back on the topic of editing, I mean, this film was a post-production nightmare from what I can see. This film had 3 different editors. So one, Welles basically abandoned the film the minute it was done. When it was done shooting, he went off to work on a couple of different other movies. He was off in Mexico for a while, then he was off elsewhere doing his other stuff, and that's where that 50-page memo comes in that I mentioned earlier in the episode. He wrote this big memo to say, here's what needs to be done, but it was too late. So they had a guy named Edward Curtis, who was the first editor, who was kicked off. Then it had Virgil Vogel, and I was like, I know that name. And then it hit me. He directed a bunch of episodes of Magnum PI. And I'm watching Magnum PI, so I see his name all the time, and that's why I was like, that name, yeah. But he also did Spencer for Hire, which is a nice little another like noir connection. It's like these guys then went on to work on neo noir, which is cool. Anyway, but then you also had a third man, Aaron Stell, and at one point, Welles was like, basically told the studio to leave Stell alone and just let him edit the film. But again, it's like, okay, well, you have these problems. They also wanted reshoots. Welles wouldn't come and do the reshoots, so they got this other guy named Harry Keller to come in and do it. Heston and Leigh refused to do the reshoots. But then found out their contracts meant that they had to do them. So they did them reluctantly. And Heston was like, that was some of the worst acting I ever did in my life. Welles was also wanted to be brought back in for ADR, and he wouldn't do it.
Orson Welles, man.
Right? At one point, Charlton Heston says, he's like, look, Welles has a sheer amount of talent, but a director should not abandon his film in post-production.
No, and he does. He legs it to go and scout for locations or drum up money for some other project.
That's it. Yes. It's Don Quinton or whatever the film is.
Yeah,
yes.
Don Quixote. Yeah, that's
Don
right.
Quixote. That's it. Don Quixote.
Which,
yes.
I don't think he ever gets made. That's when the studio sort of go in behind his back and say, right, we'll make this. This is not going to sell. We're not going to make any money on this unless we do something now. And that's when they essentially recut it. and lose about 20 minutes of it or whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah.
But so yeah, this is a troubled film by anybody's mark. Pre, during, and post production.
What do you make of the Night Man, the Night Manager?
Dennis Weaver.
Yes.
I think as a little cameo. I mean, it's bonkers, but it's very much a Wells type of cameo character.
So I guess in the off chance that someone is listening to this and they've not watched the film, this character is a.
He's only billed as the night manager. He's billed as the night manager.
Yes, billed as the night manager. He
looks after this.
Crazy.
He's bonkers. Yeah, he's mad. He's completely insane.
Yeah.
He's played by Dennis Weaver, who later found fame as the pursued driver in Duel.
Oh my God, the Steven Spielberg film.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that. I love that movie.
Spielberg cast him because he loved Touch of Evil.
Oh wow! I did not make that connection.
So it's the bloke out of Duel, and he plays this wide-eyed. I don't know. Pervert is the word that springs to my mind.
Well, he's a little pervy, but he's also a little simple. There's something that seems like he might be a little bit challenged in some respects.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I'm right in saying that Wells had seen him in a play, I think, Dennis Weaver, and had liked what he'd done. And I think he said to Dennis, and again, this is very much symptomatic of the film, where it's just, we'll make it up as we go along, that type of vibe we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And he gets him and says, what should we do? What sort of character do you want this to be? And they came up with it together. They just sat down and came up with the idea that there was this bloke who was perhaps, a bit of a Norman Bates type, bit of a mummy's boy gone wrong sort of thing.
Yeah.
And that he's got sexual psychotically issues, which of course is why he's a bit like Norman Bates. And no coincidence it's Janet Leigh. Perhaps it must be, but he's attracted to, but also frightened of Janet Leigh.
Yeah.
When they come to terrorize her in the motel, he's knows he should do something, but is quite sort of entranced by it as well.
Yeah.
So there's definitely an element of that in him. But talk about over the top performance.
It's so OTT.
It's really over the top. The bit where he just appears at the window, and his eyes are like dinner plates behind these like little round spectacles, and it just seems an odd choice. It seems an odd little cameo. When it could have been something. It didn't need to be that.
No, it really didn't need to be that big, and especially even when Charlton Heston's character Vargas comes back to the hotel and finds his wife missing and has to get information from him, and it all felt like I thought something more was going to happen. I thought, it was just again, it kind of goes back to that very early Variety review where it is just this collage of scenes that. Is a little bit, sort of has a narrative, but is not that strong of a narrative.
It's just one of those that seems like a good idea at the time.
Yes.
So we'll do it.
Yeah, the whole like hotel sequence in general, like all those sequences at the hotel, they really just sort of floor me because at some points it's very creepy, very disturbing.
Yeah.
But I feel like I'm watching a different movie.
Yeah. That's, that scene where the gang come in and they file in one by one.
Yes.
And surround her around the bed.
And they say, hold her legs. Oh my God.
Hold her legs. Yeah. And like, as I say, the girl of the group says, I want to watch.
Yeah.
But
then nothing happens.
But then nothing, on screen, nothing happens. Yeah.
But no, they say nothing happens. They say nothing.
Nothing happens off screen either. Yeah.
Yeah. Grandi says, oh, nothing. It was basically, and that made me wonder if this was a Hays Code thing. Well, I couldn't make it out. I couldn't work it out. I was like, I wonder if it was a Hays Code problem because I don't understand why they had to go that far, but then very quickly say, oh, but nothing happened. It's almost like to the audience, don't worry, audience, nothing happened.
Yeah. Maybe it was a Hays thing. I don't know. But I read into it that they're just there to intimidate her and to drug her so that he can frame her, so that Quinlan can frame her. But if that's all it is, it doesn't need to be that disturbing a setup. It could just be.
You don't
they
need
could just
30
put something in a drink. You know, they just get Dennis Weaver to poison the coffee or something. You know.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was intended to be something else. There's certainly no indication that anything does happen. I know they say nothing happened, but there's no indication from Janet Leigh's performance afterwards that anything happened either. So it seems like overkill, just to frame her for the murder that they do frame her for, and to frame her for drug possession. It seems a very melodramatic and sledgehammer to crack a nut.
A little bit, plot. Because what I don't understand is why did he need to? Why did they do all that effort to like play the loud music nonstop, then burst into her hotel room with her tired and stuff, then drug her, and then they take her back to Mexico to that hotel where Quinlan then kills Grandi, and then at one point she wakes up. Mrs. Vargas wakes up, sees Grandi dead above her. She's hanging over the railing of the bed. It's all very creepy, and I quite like the shot with the lights flashing and stuff. It's very very horror.
Again, it's very very horror. Yeah, very horror.
But then she goes running out onto the balcony screaming for help, as if she's got all of her faculties back. But then she's suddenly drugged again. It seems like she's drugged again back in the police station or something like it. It's like what, because she sees her husband. She sees Chuck Heston. She's like, husband, help me. But he doesn't hear her, and it's like
he doesn't hear her. Yeah, it's inconsistent is the word. It doesn't flow, because as we said at the outset, it's a collection of scenes strung together rather than a coherent story. And the irony is that those scenes with with Grandi hanging off the bed and the build up to that intimidation in the motel room, they are some of the best scenes in the film.
Yes.
They are some of the most effective dramatic moments in this film. But they are utterly meaningless within the confines and the construct of the film. So what are they there for? The best bits shouldn't be there. It's a strange setup.
Yes.
It's a strange film. I remember each time that scene is coming, and when it starts with Dennis Weaver playing the music loud over the tannoy into the room to disorientate her and to deprive her of sleep and all that business, you think that some significant torture scene is coming, or some serious, certainly a serious assault.
Yeah.
And a sexual assault at that. But there's no payoff.
Nope.
We've talked about films on this channel about setup and payoff and how some films do it brilliantly. This sets it up and seems to forget about it. Then even worse than forget about it, set it up and not have the guts to go through with it.
Yes.
For whatever reason, be that haze or be that can't be bothered or whatever it might be.
Yes.
I don't know. But there is something that's preventing them from carrying through these setups into a satisfactory payoff.
Yeah.
So that you are really left underwhelmed.
Yes,
and annoyed and frustrated.
Yeah, because I don't know about you, but the whole sort of ending on one side, I was like, this is interesting, intense, and basically what happens is Quinlan's partner turns double crosses Quinlan and is willing to wear wire and collect the dirt on Quinlan. And I liked the scene in general. I like the tenseness of it. I like the kind of back and forth of Quinlan and Menzies, and trying to get him to say the things and he's not saying it. Then there's the echo and he's like, what's that noise? But then like those wonderful lines where Quinlan's like, what's that thing you're wearing? And you think he knows about the wire, and he's like, oh, it's a halo, trying to act like, it's there's wonderful moments like that. That's really great. But then the whole time I kept thinking, do I buy that Quinlan's partner just turned on him that quickly just because Vargas found some information?
Yeah, because Vargas tells him to.
Yeah.
No chance. That's not how corrupt cops work.
No, I mean, because Vargas finds basically Vargas finds information in the public records that suggests that Quinlan and his partner have been wrongly convicting people and planting evidence. But all he's done, he doesn't have the proof of that.
No, he hasn't got the proof of it.
He doesn't know by looking at these public records that any of the stuff that he's looking up has actually been planted. That requires more investigation.
It does require more investigation. And the one place you're not going to find proof of a cover-up or planted
Public
evidence
records
is in the public records. And it's also not going to be in the offending officer's reports.
Right.
You know, he's going to have to look deeper than that. So, you know, it's... And the implication is that Menzies and Quinlan have been doing this for years.
Mm.
They've had this clean arrest record for decades.
Yeah.
Well,
30 years.
Is it 30 years?
Yeah, yeah. When Quinlan is getting angry because he almost when Vargas almost has the DA and the other guy on his side, he screams, you know, I've been doing this for 30 years.
Well, there you go. 30 years. Just think how many cases that is.
Yeah.
And Menzies has gone along with it. So, what's the implication here? Is Menzies, when Vargas says he's planting the evidence and it's wrong, and Menzies says, oh, yeah, you're right, Chuck, so it is. Is that because for the last 30 years he's disagreed with it and done nothing about it?
Mm.
Or is it that he's done it for the last 30 years, gone along with it, and now feels guilty about it? In which case, why? What's happened over the last 30 years to make you feel like that? Why didn't you do it sooner?
Mm.
Or, you know, should he really just be saying, you don't know what you're talking about, Vargas, and you'll never prove it, and you can do one? Quinlan and Menzies have been together for too long, conspiring with each other for too long, and Quinlan has rubbed off on Menzies for too long for Menzies to be that easily pushed around. It doesn't ring true at all. It's a real hollow bell for me, that.
Yes.
Really, it really is. And it just cheapens the whole character of Menzies. So when it then comes for Menzies to do the right thing in the same way that Joseph Cotton does in The Third Man, it has no impact whatsoever for me, because he's just shown himself to be a sap. It really is a frustrating film, this, because for a film noir starring Janet Leigh, Charlton Heston, and Orson Welles, directed by Orson Welles, this should be a lot more gripping and intense.
I have to agree. I found, my frustration was with the story. I knew what was happening. It's one of those. It's very frustrating because you know what's happening. You can follow it mostly. It's a bit like watching something like the 2005 like Fantastic Four movie. You know, you like it's all a bit clunky, but the scenes are conveying just enough for you to sort of get what's going on. Even though there's inconsistencies, even though there's character inconsistencies, there's plot inconsistencies, there's enough going on for you to sort of just like, okay, we're watching this scene now, and this is what's happening, and I guess this is why we're here now, and there is a lot of that here, and I guess with Touch of Evil, the thing is that it's so visually stunning that it does that thing where there's movies that are visually incredible that people love. I think of films like Avatar. Those films are terrible films. Because narratively they're dog crap. They're stupid. And I feel like this is kind of like falls into that camp where it has this legacy of being incredible, but on dissection, it's actually a very uneven, clunky narrative.
No, I have something to say about that, I think, which is this. Well, it's a double head of this. If this were made as a B movie and starred nobody of any great importance and was directed by somebody who was just a jobbing director at RKO, say, or Universal as it is,
sure,
I would probably think it was very well done. You might not have got all your fancy shots,
sure,
but as a tale of corrupt cops, if it had been simplified a little bit, I think it would have been quite a decent little B thriller noir. Because it's Wells, because it's Heston, because it's Leigh, I just expect a little bit more for me money. People might disagree. I mean, this film is held in such wide regard. And the second part of my point is it held in wide regard because of the flashy, showy opening scene and because it's Wells?
Yeah.
And Wells was a genius, so we must say it's brilliant, because that's how I feel about Citizen Kane, I have to say. I'm not a big Citizen Kane fan. In fact, I'd rather watch this again than watch Citizen Kane again. I really would. But people seem to, and some critics seem to say, because it's Wells, it must be great. Or because it's ex-director, it must be great. And they aren't always. Not every Hitchcock film is a masterpiece. Quite the opposite. The opposite. So I do think it's that. I think if I expect more than I get because of the people involved. I think because of the people involved, people think this is a masterpiece, and I don't think it is. I think it's a B noir thriller.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to agree with that. I think the tracking shot is incredible, and that goes a long way. I think there's the car shot where this film does the thing that films weren't doing at the time. They actually have Charlton Heston and the character playing Al in a car, driving, filming. They had to they had to basically direct themselves in that scene. Like there's things in this movie that are progressing film making, and that's cool. And I think that's what people latch onto are those visuals and some of the acting and stuff like that. That's what people are eating up. And again, I mean, like I said earlier, that Variety review reads like what I would call just about any Marvel movie lately.
Absolutely.
It's clunky scene after scene after scene. Yeah, sure, there's some interesting visuals. Yeah, sure, there's some fun fight scenes. But what was that story that I couldn't can't piece together? It's a clunky puzzle. And so I do think that's the problem. I think that's it. And it is a B movie.
This is an Orson Welles set piece, followed by an Orson Welles set piece, followed by an Orson Welles set piece, with some dialogue in between.
Yes, and some very good lines. I admit there are some very good lines in this movie, but you need more.
The cinematography and the way it's shot. I mean, it is noir.
Yeah.
The black and white print is beautiful. The lighting is beautiful. Some of it is quite obvious film noir. Some of it, I think, is very well expressed. A great sort of cinematic experience, for want of a better phrase. Because some of it looks so good that it really does knock you off your feet. When you take all that down, when you put all that to one side, because that effect can only really be magical once, because that lightning's been let out of that bottle. What's left? There has to be something left, and this is just a confused, and to use your word, inconsistent story with confused and inconsistent people populating it.
On that note, what would you get? How many Falcons would you give A Touch of Evil? I'm
going to say, because, and this is purely for those set pieces. I'm going to say, even though that doesn't go anywhere, I'm going to give it a 3.
I'm the same. My instinct is to say three Falcons. So yeah, I'm giving it 3 Falcons. Narratively, it's a mess. It's not all bad. It's just that it could have been so much better than what it was.
Yeah. So I'm docking 2 Falcons for that reason, because it is so frustrating.
Yeah,
we could have had a noir masterpiece here, and what we get is a near miss. And that wraps up our investigation. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next week with another case. In the meantime, please do like and subscribe, and be sure to take care walking down those mean streets.